we'll restart this all up, like I said, for everybody to hop right back into it. Um, I'll just wait for Tavis to come through. Like I said, this session is absolute gold. It is an absolute gold situation. Perfect.
You got me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And so where did we? What was the last point I was making?
The last point that you were making was around the name being colored in the 1890s, and that's what they've done to lump us in by law and to categorize us with the African.
Yes. Yes. Great. And so I'm hoping that I don't over repeat myself so too much, but that's where this next slide comes in, and it really offers us a point of reference so that we can start to wrap our heads around this. So this is coming from the Handbook of American Indians north of Mexico. And you notice that we have references on every slide
Yep,
because these are facts, right?
yep.
But let's read this. It says, there is no doubt that many of the broken coast tribes have been completely absorbed into the Negro race. And my question for you is wait a second. Now back in the census, you tell me that in 1520 the Negroes were valuable as laborers. And now you're telling me that the the tribes have been broken and they have been absorbed into the Negro race. And so the people have not changed. The term hasn't changed.
Yep.
The definition of the term has changed because now Negroid is a race, and that race is strictly African. And so, I'm hoping that people can follow me and see how a darker skinned population of indigenous peoples that were labeled as Negroes were, eventually lumped together through laws into a race that takes off of their home continent and places them somewhere else.
I want
But it
to
also
ask
does something.
you, which let's let people know like what laws are these that put these things in place because there was literally laws that started to change that we saw from 1500s,
Mhm.
1700s, and then 1800s. These laws kept changing, and then every single time we literally went from free persons of color, colored, and then Negro, and all these different phrases.
Yeah. Um, and so in the early 16 and 1700s, interesting enough, in Virginia, the Virginia Code, right? Because again, a lot of this began on the East Coast in Virginia, South Carolina area. Uh, they were again, they had so many different um, titles for the various admixtures of tribes and Europeans, whether they Spanish or French or Portuguese or British. All of these, all of this stuff is happening here, right?
Mhm.
And and now they want to, well, they've always wanted to control the situation, but now it's the 1600s. They have the colonies are starting to thrive, they're starting to grow, and slavery is a issue and a problem because it's the 1600s, and slavery isn't based on race yet. And so you have African slaves, you have Indian slaves, of course, as we've been talking about this whole uh, particular program, but you
Mhm.
also had European slaves.
Yep.
And
You
during
you
Baker's
also
Rebellion, where they burnt.
sorry to cut you off, but you also had native slaveholders. I think that that's something that
Yes,
goes over it too.
yeah. Well, interesting enough, by this time, we're talking about the 1700s, the slavery by the American population had changed.
Mhm.
Before the Europeans arrived, the natives, we fought against each other, and we fought against each other, and it was not always peace and calm. There were things happening here.
Mhm.
And we were, this wasn't the garden, even though the Europeans described it, that we had governing systems, and we had war. One of the interesting thing was is that the our slavery to the Native Americans didn't look like what we identify slavery as today. For
Mhm.
instance, when we went to war with each other, as a man, if I killed another man, I am now in servitude to that man's wife and to that man's children. And so after the war, guess what I got to do? I got to pack
Mhm.
up my bags. I got to leave my tribe. I got to go over to that tribe, and I got to take care of that woman and that man's woman and that man's family, because I've taken something from them. And so now I have to offer it back
Wow.
to them. And so, before, I just wanted to and again, nothing is finite, so different what tribes, but that was one of the ways that we would do it.
Mhm.
If we did that now, we would have a lot less murders. I'm not killing that man. I don't want to have to take care of that man's responsibilities.
Yeah, I do.
Right?
I
I don't
know
want
that
that man wife and his
I
children.
know that like for the Cherokee, it's also like if the child kills the other person's child, then the uncle literally has to give himself up, or the auntie will literally have to give themselves up. And yeah, that kind of makes it so unless you have like an insurance claim on your auntie or your uncle, you don't really want to, put them out there like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. However, um, after um, after colonial times, and as the various tribes that are still able um, to still exist, right, and still be able to trade, it's just natural. Everybody had slaves at that time.
Mhm, mhm,
Also, we have to recognize that many of the tribes and many of the colored folk or black folk that winded up with slaves, some of
mhm,
my ancestors had slaves too,
mhm,
bought them to protect them,
mm,
or or had their brothers and sisters, their children listed as slaves to protect their property. And
mm.
so a lot of while we do have stories of tribes enslaving each other um, and then selling the captors to the European, we also have other stories of tribes enslaving themselves in order to protect them from the European, right?
Yeah,
And so we just have to.
I
Yes,
have
definitely.
I have family members. So my ancestors were enslaved by Big Warrior, William Weatherford, and William McIntosh. So that's who my family literally was enslaved by. And then they were passed through the family siblings and children. So when I take my family back, I end up taking them back literally to these men's loins because there's like
Hmm.
no other place that they come from because they were also being born in the time of breeding farms. So I'm getting my I would say it's my third great grandmother on my grandfather's side is literally William McIntosh's slave, and then he passed her to his daughter Jane. So it's literally that much embedded into it, and they didn't see a difference between each other until the 1900s came around. And about 1870, they start to separate the family lines.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and actually interesting enough because what time you said 1870s. Interesting enough, what
1870s.
was happening around that time. This is when, again, here's a quote referencing the late 1800s, where they are separating, where they're saying, okay, if you're brown, you no way that you can be an Indian. You've just been absorbed to the African race, and then individuals such as my sister or yourself, whom
Mm-hmm.
were born of somewhat lighter skin. Now, what do we do with that? Okay, we'll send them over there so that we won't have to deal with some of these questions of identity.
Wow. Yeah, with Katie Grayson in my family particular, she's another one. Literally a book, it's called Black White Indian, and it's about the families of the Creek Nation. And Grayson, she did the exact same thing. She left her black, darker skin Indian husband with her children, and then went and married someone that was actually Scottish mixed to assimilate.
Mhm. 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 These are difficult times. Again, remember, you have the consistent fear of being murdered because of who you are, and then because of what you look like, right? So it's
Mhm,
not
mhm.
just whether I'm light skinned or dark skinned. That's one issue. But then the next issue is that, well, wait, they find out that I have a blood connection to these lands, they might kill me just because they don't want any Native Americans around anymore, and I'm
Yeah.
a threat to them.
Yeah,
And so,
my family in particular, they were literally considered traitors' children, being in relation to William McIntosh, being in relation to
mhm.
Red Eagle, William Weatherford. They were calling them after the Red Sticks Wars traitors. So in to be affiliated to them at all would have had you wiped out.
Yeah, yes, yes, yes. Interesting. Well, we kind of like went over this one, but
Mhm,
I want to go to the next slide.
mhm,
But just real quick, people, again, this is coming from the handbook of the American Indian north of Mexico, and it's probable that many of the Negroes of the whole lower Atlantic and Gulf region, so now have much Indian blood. The point that I want to make out here is that what is considered the whole lower Atlantic? Well, you're in Canada, and
mhm.
so your perspective may be a little bit different than my perspective living in Philadelphia, right? I'm
Yeah.
I'm a couple hundred, maybe 1,000, at least 500, 600 miles south of you.
Mhm.
And so lower Atlantic is actually everything lower than New York.
Mm.
And of course, we know what the Gulf region is because that's the Florida, Georgia, South Carolina region.
Mhm.
And so, I just want to point out that this particular slide, when they say the Negroes of the lower Atlantic and Gulf regions, they're talking about from New York to Florida and from Georgia and South Carolina over to the Mississippi Valley.
Yeah.
And so we're talking and I'm going to go into slide form for a second. Now, okay,
Mhm.
great. And so this is a map from, well, a so-called map from the 1600s. It's actually is obviously incomplete. There's there's so many things missing here. However, I want you to pay attention to the portions in green, the dark green area where it says the southeast, right?
Mhm.
And again, remember we said the lower Atlantic and the Gulf regions. And I just described to you, basically from New York to Florida, from Georgia over to the Mississippi. And so that's that southeastern portions there in the bottom right hand corner. Now, and this is a map from the 1600s, programmed to do something, but it won't. So we'll just talk about it.
Okay.
This next
Oh,
image
okay. I
here.
was able to see you move it actually. Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Okay. So I'm actually not, I'm going to talk about this map next, right? We
Okay.
talked about this map here.
Okay.
And if you could see the southeast right here, right?
Hmm.
This is 1600s. This map is from the um, uh, 1800s. And it's a census map of the slave population of, and so look at these two maps, everyone. Again, the map to your right is the 1600 Native American map. The map to your left that I'm moving around now is a slave map from the 1800s. And if
Wow.
you look, it's the same map. Now, one more map, and I'm pulling this up now.
Hmm.
And now this map is a map of the African American in the United States in 2020. Now, these maps are all the same map. Look, how could they all be the
Wow.
same map, but the people are being called something different? And so, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to offer that a little bit more fluid with my presentation.
I'll cut it down. I'll cut it down.
But I hope that you get the gist of what I'm trying to share.
That's actually so, like, it's literally right there. This reminds me of how Venezuela is trying to annex Guyana by the map, and they're just trying to basically take 50% of Guyana on the map. And think about it, in 100 years, if they do that, people that live there wouldn't even be ever identified as Guyanese, even though they're Guyanese.
Much so, yes, and much like other genocides that are occurring here, which we are a byproduct of a genocidal act that occurred here, in the Americas, and this map basically is a visual aid through the centuries to show and highlight how a group of brown and darker Native Americans can still stay in the same region, but their history is erased and now replaced with a story that removes their true identity.
Wow. I wanted to also get a chance to ask you what's really neat about this map as well that I really like is it literally shows every place that my family came from in the United States. It's like hints all the way from Arkansas all the way to Alabama. And then everybody was forced to migrate in the 1800s. So this is like where my family originally came from, and then they were all moved to Oklahoma in the 1800s, which I always thought was very interesting because they always say that Trail of Tears is for the natives. So something to also think about as well. And I wanted to also ask you, okay, so when we speak about a lot of tribes, one of the more popular tribes in the United States is the Navajo tribe, and they are actually cousins of the Dene tribe. They do not actually come from Arizona, so there is a lot of forcible removals happening, and there's a lot of forced migrations that really kind of perverse our idea of where certain tribes and people even really come from.
Yeah, yep, that was purposefully done also, because then, the confusion allows them to uh, continue to hold the control.
Mm.
And it also displaces us and legally takes rights and positions away from us that we may be able to argue on a like maybe in international courts rather than just taking them to court, and
Yes.
so one of the things
Mm,
that one of the things that I like to just share with the community is that indigenous laws actually supersede colonial laws.
mhm,
However, Native American laws are created by the United States. And
mm,
so we have to recognize that the United States is not educating us properly, and that there are sets of laws and rules that actually have everything to do with us as an indigenous peoples, but are outside of the United States privy. The United States didn't establish them. And
mhm,
so instead of going to court, arguing and fighting and battling with, whoever we having a problem with, using their law, right? We're arguing with the colonizer about the wrongs that they've done, and we using their laws
mhm,
to raise our point, and they just continue to knock us down. Well, if we use laws that supersede their laws, and if we go into courts that they don't have jurisdiction in, and they would just be a petitioner, just like any other individual would be, now we have better footing and we have a better position, and we can receive better outcomes with respects to, our development, our history, our identity, right?
wow.
But that's a whole nother conversation. And maybe we could talk a little bit about that next time.
Definitely, definitely. I think that that's super duper impactful because I'm thinking about the fact that I'm looking at cemeteries that have been abandoned in Oklahoma, and I can list over the 13 Black towns that are in Oklahoma where my family all has land allotments in. So my family owns property of all throughout Oklahoma, and nobody, because I'm like one of the last surviving descendants that's able bodied to actually go out there. I'm one of the last ones. And we grew up disenfranchised. And my dad thought we had absolutely nothing. And this entire time, we had everything, but we had to go and actually start to fix the names on the tombstones is something very important that we're doing because a lot of these people are misidentified because of who they were. Again, like I've mentioned before, these people are almost like, think about it, like imagine if someone was enslaving our influencers of today. These people were not nobodies. People knew who they were at this point in time. And so when we see like really weird stuff happen to people's paper trail, there's a reason why that happened to that particular person. My great grandparents, if their names were correctly put on it, I would have then known everything about them. I would have
Mm-hmm.
known everything about them and who they were descendants of, but that was done purposefully. I also, I know, I wanted to ask you as well, um, before we go into the next slides, I wanted to ask you about enumerators and educators and how they were built to instill these laws that really misidentify and completely confuse people, especially children that they're teaching.
Mm. I mean, that's just a tactic that they use.
Mhm,
Even with the boarding schools and kill the Indian, save the man, right?
mhm,
This space where the depression of our culture, traditions, even our look,
mhm,
to usurp that and to so-called civilize us. And I mean, there's no better way to do it than through the re-education of our children,
mhm,
because things are passed down through the children. And so um, if they can reach our children and cut off the transfer of those cultures, those traditions, those cultural ways, and then replace them with their so-called what is it? What did they use? I forget. With the colonizers' ways, right? um, then they feel like that's a tactic of war, right?
Mhm.
And that was used against us to basically help them to win. I mean, they up until now they was winning. They're not winning now, but it did
Yeah.
get them to where they are now.
Yeah. Okay. And I like even with the enumerators, I want to touch on that before we moved on to the next slide because that's something that I've dealt with. Having on my dad's mom's side, she has family that was in Texas and in Arkansas. So when they're bouncing between these places and everything like that during like the civil wars and everything, their races literally changed. And
Right.
they went from being natives to being full on white. And then the family that was darker was then called black, and then they were enslaved. So I felt like
Hmm.
that was a protection tactic that was done in order to protect those ones because they still all lived together. They all still got along.
Well, yeah, and again, remember during these times, the United States were paying people to go around and to do the census. And so, depending on the individual's biased, right? They're, whether they were racist or not, or, how they felt that particular day, you know, um, depending on whether they were take bribes, right? Well, you know what?
Mm,
Just leave it alone today. Right? Here go a couple, or here go your 5 cent. Leave me alone. Put whatever you want to put down.
yeah.
And so while these census records and a lot of the information is helpful, even the United States stuff is not 100% correct, right? You can, because of the misinformation, the misogyny, the racism, the bigotry
Mhm.
that existed in these individuals' framework, right? In the system that they lived under,
Yeah.
we would have to go through things like the paper bag test, right? Or the pencil to the hair test.
Ugh,
And so, um, just so those tests alone may change your identity from the census reporter that knocked on your door that day. And so,
wow.
this is so much to consider when we're talking about the the counters and the types of information throughout the United States history.
Awesome. Like you were saying with beliefs, I have one last question and then I'm gonna let you go. And thank you so much for all of this information. I'm going to be sending you everything once we're all done with the edits. My last question was actually about manifest destiny. So I think
Mm,
that that's something that we can kind of close out with.
mm.
And I think that that would be a fair thing to close out with to leave the people with.
Wow, that's such a that's a big one right there. That manifests destiny. That's an ugly topic to talk
Mhm.
about, but it's definitely one that's necessary. Even recognizing that we're seeing the manifestation of the results of what their manifest destiny program from the 18 and early 1900s has done to the world, right? And oh man, where do we begin? Where do you want to begin with this manifest
Well,
destiny
I
thing?
I definitely want to talk about what is the belief of manifest destiny. Maybe if we start there, and then next time that I catch up with you, we can get into the thick of it. But I think if people kind of understood when people came with this belief, and then they hopped on their
Mhm.
ship and they saw the Indian, what was it that they believed?
Okay, yeah. So um, understand that manifest destiny is one of the eras of European conquest, right? Because you also had the Great Awakening and things of that nature. But this manifest destiny was taking hold when they were moving west, right? And they're saying, okay, now that we have colonized the East Coast and we have firm control, we have civilized the the savages, right? And now it is in our is it is our destiny to civilize the whole continent from sea to shining sea. And
Wow.
so this manifest destiny claim, because that's what all it is a claim, was used as their um, to give them credence, right? To say that to say that although we are committing genocide, although we're taking and we're doing all of these savage things because God, because we're God's chosen people, all of our sins are in the for the benefit of good, and so we are free to do whatever we want. And because the Aryan man, or the European man, is the chosen one, these are little terms that they use as far as this manifest ones. They have the right, the privilege, and the authority to spread their system across the United States. And then once they reached California, they said, you know what, we should take this manifest destiny across the world.
Wow. I I've heard also that with Manifest Destiny, they likened the Indian to the Canaanites. So they thought it was like their job almost
Mm-hmm.
to get rid of
Mm-hmm.
us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like their job to either civilize us
Mhm.
or to erase us, right? So
Wow.
either we would assimilate into their culture and become um, a pure man,
Wow.
or we're less than human and we're worthy of subjugation.
Sounds like genocide to me. Okay, that's definitely what it sounds like. Tavis, thank you so much. Thank you so, so much. You've blessed us with so much information. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I hope that this conversation was beneficial. I hope that it was easy for people to follow, and I'm definitely interested in continuing to, have these types of conversations and sharing with your audience and others. So I'd like to say thank your audience for staying tuned, and thank you very much for asking us to come on and share some of this information.
Thank you so much, Chi McWish, you coke. I'm gonna leave you now.
Thank you
But
so much, and I hope that you have a wonderful day, and peace to you, your family, and your tribe.
yes, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to be moving here and showing my last slide. This is who we did this presentation for. As you guys can see right here, I have all of my ancestors lined up quite nicely. This is the dark skinned Indians that come from several different lines. All these people ain't related, but they're all related to me. And they all come from several different lines, from Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia to Oklahoma. This is what it is in my family. Even right here, look at the cute little baby right there. Okay. So I say all that to you guys to let you know that we have harmony workshops for Monday, and we have it for our Tuesday, and we also have it on our Thursday. But as always, Chimikwich, thank you so much for coming out, and thank you for workshops. Thank you so much.